Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to Writer's Showcase. I'm happy to be here and be able to have my guests here. First off, please welcome.
Hello, I'm back.
Welcome, and also welcome.
He's going right for the crew!
Making my triumphant return in a couple hours. I might be able to tell you why.
Lovely. Well, we're glad to have you. Oh, Valerian's internet seems to have killed itself. He's not backstage.
Valerian's internet didn't kill itself.
What?
This is the work
Valerian's
of
internet didn't kill
imperialists.
itself.
Okay. Because he just kind of yeeted out of the backstage edge. So. Oh. Excellent.
Is he back?
Yes.
Drum
he
roll.
is.
Valerian, the lesser-known dragon-type Eevee.
Greetings.
He lives.
I got Beleriolf, and then I got de-Beleriolf, so here I am.
Lovely. Well, we're happy to have you. So,
Thank you.
So here's how the order's gonna work. How about we do Carl Sailor, Drake the Duelist, then Count Valerian, and then myself. That sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it might be best if I go last, so we'll see what's happening when those two are done.
Okay.
All right, I'll start these things off. This is the introduction to a story I wrote a while back, but never finished. I might pick it up for a while if I get the time. This is The Magic Stone. The warm afternoon sun wove between the trees and danced playfully across the surface of the water. A gentle breeze played with Avi's long dark hair as she sat by the edge of the shallow brook filling water skins. It was tedious work. Avi sighed as the skin she was holding under the surface of the brook slowly filled up with water. It wasn't fair. All the other girls were back at the campsite, helping the women preserve meat for the journey, or mending clothes, or looking after the infants. Why couldn't she have been given something to do back in camp? There was more than plenty to be done before the tribe started north tomorrow. Avi pulled the water skin out of the brook, sealed its top, laid it on the pile beside her, and started work on another one. She had a good idea why she had been put to this particular task. This past winter had been her 16th. She was a woman grown now as far as the tribe was concerned. What set her apart from the other girls of her age was that she was still unmarried. It wasn't her fault, of course. The boy to whom she had been promised since girlhood had managed to get himself killed the previous autumn. Avi snorted. She hadn't even liked that muscle-bound dolt anyways. When she'd learned that he had tried to take down that elk all by himself and gotten himself trampled to death instead, she could have jumped for joy. But now that he was dead and unable to marry her, but more importantly, unable to give her any sons, the rest of the tribe saw Avi as something strange, neither a girl nor fully a woman. The young women and girls who had once been Avi's closest friends now kept their distance, staring at her through narrowed eyes and whispering behind her back as she passed. Avi shook her head and returned to her task. It might be tedious work, but she didn't mind. At least it took her mind away from the campsite and its many glares and whispers. There were no whispers here by the brook, only the wind. One last water skin remaining. Avi paused for a moment and then glanced hurriedly over both shoulders. She was alone. She smiled and stretched out one hand over the flowing water. The surface of the brook trembled beneath Avi's outstretched palm, lightly at first, as though a sudden breeze had touched its surface. Avi focused on the ripples, and they began to grow. The air around Avi began to tingle with unseen energies, exciting her like nothing else ever did in life. Avi lifted her hand, and the surface of the water rose with it, bulging and eventually peeling off into a bubble of water hanging beneath her palm in midair. Avi quickly covered her mouth with her free hand to keep from giggling with the delight. She had the gift of magic ever since she could remember, but she never managed to create a bubble of water this big before. She quickly snatched up the last empty water skin and raised the tip of the bubble to siphon off the water. The skin was nearly half full now. Avi lowered her hand back down to call up another bubble from the brook. Maybe she could make an even bigger one this time. There was a sudden rustling sound in the small bush beside the brook. Avi nearly jumped out of her skin. She glanced over to where the sound had come from. It was probably just a rabbit or a squirrel. Avi sighed with relief. She was still alone. That was good. Magic was the sort of thing you needed to keep secret. If the rest of the tribe learned about her gift... Boo! Avi screamed as the shape came bounding out of the underbrush directly behind where she'd been looking. The shape collided with Avi and knocked her to the ground. She quickly rolled up to look at the face of her assailant. I got you, Kit giggled. Avi flushed. How long had Kit been stalking her? Had he seen anything? And if he had, would he tell anyone else? If the rest of the tribe knew. I found something amazing, Kit said with a grin from ear to ear. Want to come and see it? A wave of relief washed over Avi. So Kit hadn't seen anything after all. I don't know, Kit, Avi said as she slowly wriggled out from under the boy. Kit was a full year her junior, but he was starting to overtake her in size. Come on, Kit said, and lightly hopped forward so that he was back on top of her. It's really incredible, I promise. Kit, Avi said, trying to put on a more authoritative tone, I have to get these water skins back to camp. Well, what's the hurry? Kit teased. Are the mermaids gonna steal them? Kit, Avi tried to protest. Come on, Avi, Kit leaned down to whisper in her ear. Let's go on an adventure. The words took hold of Avi like a spell, and she forgot all about the stupid water skins. She matched Kit's grin, pressed her knees up against his stomach, and playfully pushed him off her. Kit somersaulted and landed on his feet, like he always did. Follow me, it's right up this way. Avi got to her feet, quickly brushed the dust off her skirt, and hurried after Kit. He led her through the trees at a breakneck pace, gliding between the underbrush like a shadow. Avi struggled to keep pace with Kit. The boy had always been more agile than her. The rest of the tribe saw Kit as something of a problem, a troublemaker and a prankster who shirked his responsibilities to go off on wild adventures. Well, of course, there wasn't much that could be done about it. Kit was also the chief's son, and one day he too would be chief after his father stepped down to join the elders. Maybe Kit could marry her. Avi played with the thought. Kit was promised to some other girl, of course, but maybe once he was chief. Chiefs could do what they wanted, and that included taking multiple wives. Being a chief's wife would certainly solve the issue of her social standing. None of those girls back in camp would dare ostracize her if she belonged to him. Kit led Avi through the trees and up the steep slope to the edge of the valley. Avi huffed and puffed up the incline after him. She wasn't used to all this running and climbing. Suddenly, Kit hopped over one of the last fallen tree trunks and vanished from sight. Avi scrambled over the tree and looked about, trying to guess where Kit might have vanished to. Avi! Kit's head popped up from beneath the fallen tree's roots, like a rabbit in its burrow. Down here! I found a hole! You brought me all the way up here for some hole in the ground? Avi wheezed as she followed Kit down into the pit. It's not the hole, Kit said as Avi dropped down beside him. He pointed. Look at that! Peeking out of the dirt less than an arm's length away was a brilliant blue stone. It was about half the size of Avi's palm, and its clear surface looked like it had been smoothed by river water. The stone cast a pale blue glow on the damp soil around it, and a strange flowing symbol was carved into its surface. Avi looked closer, and she thought she could see a flicker of movement from deep within the stone, almost like there was something alive inside it, or as if the stone itself was alive. Wow! The words slipped out of Avi's lips and hung in the air like a morning mist. Do you think it's a magic stone? Kit whispered. Maybe, Avi whispered back as she stared deeper into the depths of the stone. She'd never seen anything like it before, even in her wildest dreams. It was beautiful. I heard that magic attracts dragons, Kit whispered. You think it's true? I don't know, Avi said uneasily. She'd never seen a dragon before, but she had heard about them from the elders. They were said to be tremendous flying beasts with teeth and claws like jagged nightmares. Their scales were said to be harder than stone, and their breath was like 1,000 burning fires. If that was what the stories said about them, then Avi had no desire to know for certain. She shivered at the thought that her magic might be luring such frightening creatures. Well, it couldn't be true, could it? If dragons were attracted to magic, she should have seen dozens of them by now. Maybe it was subtle. Maybe it only attracted nearby dragons. But a stone like this. Let's swipe it! Kit's hand shot out toward the strange glowing stone. What? No! Avi caught Kit's arm before it reached the stone. Aww, Kit groaned and shook his arm free of Avi's grasp. Why not? We don't know what it is, Avi said frantically. It could be dangerous. Yeah, you're probably right, Kit muttered. Avi glanced back at the blue stone, but quickly tore her eyes from its captivating beauty. Come on, she said. We have to get those water skins back to camp. Right, Kit vaulted out of the pit and hopped back over the fallen tree. I'll meet you back at camp, he called back. Kit, wait, Avi cried out, but to no avail. The boy was already beyond earshot. Avi sighed and slumped back into the pit. Once more, her gaze turned back to the strange glowing stone peeking out of the dirt. She leaned forward to get a closer look. There was indeed something flickering in the depths of the stone, but always just at the corner of her eye. Whenever her gaze moved to watch the flickering, it stopped and reappeared somewhere else in the stone. It was hypnotic. Avi slowly reached out a trembling hand toward the stone. Well, of course it was nonsense what Kit had said about magic attracting dragons. But what if the stone truly was magic? As her fingers neared, Avi could feel something, a sort of unseen energy crackling between her fingers and the stone, like lightning. Like the sensation she felt when she used her magic, but somehow different, more dangerous, more powerful. This stone was an object of tremendous power, no doubt about it. Terror and excitement mixed in Avi's mind like they had never before. The world was unraveling. Avi! Kit's voice called from afar. Are you coming? Avi jumped and hastily called back, I'll be there in a minute. Avi looked back at the stone, and after a moment's pause, she quickly snatched it out of the dirt and stuffed it into a pouch in her skirt. It was just a stone. Maybe a bit prettier than the average rock, but still just a stone like any other. There couldn't possibly be any harm in taking it. Now then, if those water skins didn't make it back to camp soon, she would be in real trouble. And that's it.
Are the what's the echo? I think that there's a
Sorry
silent
about the
one
alarm
here.
back there.
Oh no, you're fine. I did know some. I'm noticing slight similarities to Aragon, but from a female perspective. Was that intentional, or?
It's not a dragon egg, if that's what you're wondering.
Ah, okay. Yeah, just the blue stone was like, blue stone in the middle of the woods. Okay. Well, at least it's not a dragon egg. Then that totally makes sense. Okay.
No, it's a battery.
Ah.
It's a magical battery that lets people cheat the laws of magic that I've created in this world.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
It can basically do anything.
So kind of like
even something that would be otherwise impossible.
So kind of like Sherlindria's wand in Willow or a Sangreal in Wheel of Time.
I don't know what that first one is, but sort of.
Impossible lift a big rock or impossible divide by 0?
Like divide by 0. Like there is, like, because of one of these these strange artifacts, there is a piece of a castle that is floating in the air about a mile above the world, just hanging out, chilling. And there is also an immortal wanderer who froze his body in a moment, trying to figure out how to undo it, looking for one of these stones.
Okay.
Well, I like it. It's cool. Very intriguing.
Yeah, it's a good start from what I can see.
Oh yeah.
Worth continuing.
I have a few more chapters of this. Maybe I'll bring them on in a later edition.
Cool.
Lovely.
Well, I'm down to read it, or at least listen to it. Drake, I believe that you are up next.
Okay, I got a big in here, and I'm probably gonna have to break this into several streams. I think like at least 3, probably 4, as I go through the reading of chapter from Science and Sorcery, How to Win Friends and Influence Allies. In case you were wondering, the restraining order says I have to stay 500 feet from every comedy club.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, I'm changing all of the names when I redux the crap out of this. But let's see how it hangs. This time, I'm actually after the stream is done, for anybody watching this after the fact, I'll let Dunn get the URL for the account of Urios in case anybody wants a background on this, because it is very long and I don't feel like going into it right now. The basic attention deficit elevator pitch is werewolf apocalypse. That's all you really need to know. So, we ready?
Yeah, I'm down. Go for it.
Okay, just let me start a timer to make sure I don't go too long. The venerable admiral eased Gerion's thrusters with a pull of a lever, his motion steady and tempered with the control of 1,000 repetitions. He and the ancient yet powerful vessel were one, even in the hardest of maneuvers. But he could always count on the steel legend to do its job without fail. Once the retro thrusters brought the ship to a complete halt, Void Admiral Stav leaned back in the cramped cockpit, lowering the seat for a brief drop before riding backwards through a long, dark, metallic tunnel. It was of no necessity, but he only felt it right to meet each of his passengers face to face before they boarded. None of his Voidwalker predecessors would have to be this thorough, checking each of his passengers personally. However, he was no Voidwalker, and his increasingly creaky joints were too old for the risk. Besides, it gave him a great opportunity to meet new and interesting people. Scene change. We require transportation, Void Admiral. Stav must have appeared quite shocked to see the toppled form of one of the vicious, detestable blights on the Infinity Bridge. They had a T'cha, better known as the lycanthropes. Though he had heard and read many accounts made by others about these monsters, he had never seen one of the beasts up close and personal before. Its jet black skin had an indigo luster to it, as if metallic. Its eyes glowed a pitiless crimson. Its breath reeked of dead flesh, apparent as soon as the cargo doors opened. Other passengers already aboard the Geryon could be heard behind the Admiral, commenting about the foul smells that seeped into the cabin. Its odor as relentless as the beast itself. The creature's heaving breaths only exacerbated the odor. Still, not even Shtav was so jaded that he couldn't notice the blessings the situation offered. By Zaviot's grace, the creature's breathing was the only thing it did to prove it was still alive. Keeled over, seemingly torn to shreds, missing at least one limb and bearing a deep, irrevocable open wound on its lower back. The wound looked to have been ripped. No, chewed open. No other creature but a lycanthrope would still live through that. It was in no condition to attack, for now. It would probably be a bit much of a stretch to make such reassurance to his passengers, especially considering that this lycanthrope's kin were responsible for destroying the lives of far too many of those who rode aboard his ship. Such were the times. You're mad if you think I'm letting you take a live lycanthrope aboard my ship, Stav addressed the Voidwalker before him, or at least he assumed the young man was a Voidwalker. Who else would have the guts to handle a live lycanthrope like its barely living body was some kind of toy? The Voidwalker responded by setting his boot against the almost pitiable creature's neck. I have a laboratory on the Great Aegis, Zeta District, Stav gasped. The civilian zone? I require this living specimen for my research, he clarified pointlessly, evidently oblivious to Stav's actual concerns. Are you capable of facilitating transportation or not? Stav bit back his immediate rejection as he studied the loquacious young man before him. Drab clothes, messy hair, and a rifle slung over his shoulder that seemed nearly as tall as its wielder. Didn't look like any Scipiari pattern rifle Stav had ever seen before. The young man must have been a mercenary. Still, no mercenary Stav had ever heard of before had ever put so much thought into the monsters he hunted. Unless... No, it couldn't be. It was at this point Stav thought to examine the mercenary's seeming accomplice. The young lady seemed a lot less immediately interested in what was going on. She stood off to the side, as if in a strictly subordinate role to her compatriot, or just lazy. As if waiting for her supposed boss to finish negotiating, the girl just stood and stared at her sword, a broadsword that glowed as if aflame. The poor thing seemed to have nothing more than the rag she wore and the blade she carried to call her own. Moreover, she looked as if she hadn't even seen food in quite some time, much less eaten any. If she too was a mercenary, she mustn't have been a very good one, or at the very least, she must have been a newcomer. Usually one takes up the dangerous, violent life of a sellsword to escape such poverty. Stav almost felt bad that he couldn't help the girl's boss complete whatever obscure contract they were on. My answer is still no, Stav finally responded to the lead mercenary. Your concern for the safety of your passengers is as redundant as it is utterly moot. It's not just the risk, it's the principle, Stav insisted. The Geryon is more than just a warship. It's a mobile fortress, a sanctuary. A lot of the people I ferry across the bridge are fleeing those things. Now, I'm not the Geryon's first pilot, and I won't be your last. What kind of reputation would you get if I allowed you to bring a live lycanthrope aboard? Does it matter what they think? The mercenary responded with the grace and empathy of a jagged stone. I require transportation for myself, my ally, and my cargo. Permit your passengers to think what they will. Seeing the stony expression, Stav had no more doubts in his mind. The nicknames the Voidwalker had earned around the table over the years came back in a torrent, eventually bringing his real name along for the ride. I should have known it was you, Tap. Almost didn't recognize you without a hand of cards and a mountain of chips. Tap squinted back at him as if he'd struck a nerve with the luckiest damn hand on Tertius. I've been betting with riskier wages as of late. The girl took notice of Stav's claim. Hey, wait a sec, you're poker buddies with this old fart? As eloquent in speech as in attire. Charming. Tap made no acknowledgement of the girl, instead keeping the icy, unwavering focus that made him such a legend directed to Stav. If you remember me so vividly, you should likewise recall that only a fool would stand in opposition to me. As he spoke, the Voidwalker reached into his jacket, drew a polished chrome revolver with a long barrel. Grasping the weapon's grip with both hands, he aimed it down, though he could draw it up at any point. Stav chuckled. The man of granite he remembered was a better bluffer than this. And just what do you think you're going to do with that? Shoot me? For Zaviat's sake, I'm the Infinity Bridge's ferryman now. Try to cow me with threats of violence? The Jerian is a permanent Zongrit garrison watching over it at all times, and they'd smear you across the bridge if you so much as think of trying to pull something. Besides, bigger, tougher-looking Voidwalkers than you have threatened to do a lot worse than just shoot me. What do you plan to... As soon as Tap's pistol went off, Stav could hear the commotion and the ruckus behind him, coming from the passengers who could hear his arguing, but wouldn't have seen it. Stav was amazed to be able to hear their shrill screams over the ringing in his mortal ears. Don't panic, no need to be alarmed, everything's under control, Stav called out into the cabin. He dared not peek his head in to see his clientele face to face, not when he could still feel the droplets of splattered lycanthrope blood covering his face. They might get the wrong idea. Tap lowered his pistol's smoking barrel and gave the Admiral a blank stare. Splattered with lycanthrope blood, he would seem a sadistic figure if you were to mote in any way. The lycanthrope at his feet wheezed a single long exhale as viscera dripped from the crater in its face where its eye once was. The girl shuddered. She clasped her hands over what might have been ringing ears. Holy shit! Warn me next time you're going to pull a stunt like that! The lycanthrope is no longer capable of responding to outward stimuli with violence, as I hope I have thoroughly proven. Can you still find cause to withhold transportation? Shav's mouth continued to hang open in shock. He closed his mouth if only to shake his head. The centuries haven't been kind to you either, have they? Still, fair is fair, I suppose. Shav gestured towards the boarding ramp leading up to the main cabin, at which point he would begin his speech. Welcome aboard the Void Ship Jerian. You may enter the cabin here. If you require help moving your cargo, Zongrit guards aboard the vessel will assist you in relocating your belongings to the cargo bay. The cargo bay will suffice for us as well. Ah, come on, Tap. Don't tell me we're going to hitch a ride all the way to the Great Ages, not in the cushy safe cabin, but in this thing's piece of crap trunk, the girl complained. It allows for ample time to discuss strategies. Tap answered his subordinate, turning to face her. Without even turning his head, he gave Stav a glance out the corner of his eye, specifically away from the Void Admiral and his fragile clientele. Stav retired to the boarding ramp, suppressing all questions he had about the whole situation. Younger, saner entities have tried and failed to unravel the mystery of the infamous Voidwalker Tempest. What chance did, how did Tap's companion put it, some old fart have? Scene change. The lycanthrope's carcass landed on the steel deck with great force and little poise. Careful! Mind the specimen, brute! Tap barked at the reptilian figure. The offending creature merely sauntered away from the discarded lycanthrope remnant, its tail swinging to and fro. With great control, its body weight shifted from one foot to another, as if it could lash out with any appendage at an instant's notice without compromising its balance. It cast a long, horned shadow over the mounds of crates and boxes strewn across the barren rooms it left. I am the head of Zaviat, not your personal pack mule, it hissed, not even dignifying Tap with eye contact. Your specimen is an abomination. I owe it no heed. I owe it and its wretched kin naught but obliteration. Tap shook his head at the creature's departure. Try as the Zongrit fools might to blame the lycanthropes for their near extermination, none owed more of the fault than the Zongrit themselves. A pity that a species with such remarkable physiological potential had to be burdened with such blinding, deafening pride. A far shorter figure followed Tap up the ramp and into the cargo area. As she passed the Zongrit, she stared up at it. When it stopped and glared back, Lana backed away. She kept her center of mass between a weapon and the creature, as if to protect her luminous blade from the fanatical reptile for however long it would take it to dismember her and claim its prize. Permit my ally to pass, Zongrit. Bring harm to her, and I will see that your species has another irrevocable loss to mourn. Such a provocation inclined the creature to crane its serpentine neck to look back at him. You would not dare. To accentuate his point, Tap drew his revolver from underneath his coat. He wondered if the weapon's payload could terminally wound a Zongrit. Perhaps this foolish reptile would give him that long-awaited case study on the subject. There are scant few things I dare not, Zongrit. The Zongrit appeared to study Tap through squinted eyes, paying no heed to Lana as she skittered past. We are acutely aware, it answered, as if on behalf of its entire kind. With a swift, almost cutting motion, it slammed a clawed fist against a nearby wall, directly into a broad circular button. At the strike, a droning siren blared an oscillating drone, while the cargo cabin lit up with red lights. Pneumatic pistons strained with dull reverberation to raise the loading ramp and pull it closed over the entrance. As the ramp rose, the Zongrit proceeded along it, finally leaping from its edge. What must have been hundreds of pounds of body weight, likely predominantly muscle, did little to hinder the Zongrit's agile bound. A heavy strike of metal on metal, punctuated with dozens of ratcheting locks, concluded the sealing of the cargo bay's rear hatch. The sound of a depressurizing hiss resonated in the veritable echo chamber. Tap glanced to his feet, finding that he misjudged the source of the hiss. The tattered, broken lycanthrope at his feet sucked in a great breath of air. Breath of Savian! I thought that lizard would never leave. It talks? Tap turned his eyes in the direction of the shrill enunciation. The source of the voice peered around a large industrial supply crate, each one nearly tall enough to eclipse the girl twice. Perhaps she didn't balk or flinch at his scrutinizing gaze in any way. Peculiar, she didn't balk or flinch at his scrutinizing gaze in any way, as she did to the Zongrit from earlier. Many a Voidwalker before her openly described his stare as cold, piercing, inhuman, or some combination of the aforementioned. Others were more visibly unsettled, but less vocally, leaving Tap to suppose that those too timid to speak in his sight likely shared similar thoughts and fears. While the winnowing had not expunged all valor from the Infinity Bridge, those who still demonstrated such traits after the massacre often derive their boldness from either arrogance or ignorance. Tap imagined that this girl of meek stature and less than enviable constitution likely drew her own boldness from the latter. It had better talk. Tap squatted down to the lycanthrope. As he did so, its breathing oscillated quickly, as if to bend a snarl into the emulation of a cackle. What's the matter? Were you out taking a piss when all the other mercenaries were picking the good allies, and you just realized that you're stuck with sickly little dreads like her? You should be less concerned with those following my coattails, and more concerned with what I'm capable of doing to your whole species, without aid. Ha! It scoffed audibly. You want to wipe the lycanthropes from the face of the bridge? Then do it already. Wipe them out and leave no stone unturned in your genocide. See if I give a damn. As far as I'm concerned, you'd be doing me a favor. Keep the beast talking, Tap told himself. See what it knows, his voice of reason added. How so? Its single remaining crimson eye squinted. I hate them, Voidwalker. All of them. I'd kill every last one of the blasted Takha myself if I still could. Look at me. Look at what they did to me. Lana chortled from outside Tap's immediate field of vision. Yeah, you used to be a whole lycanthrope. Shut up, urchin, it replied with a fury that its body was in no condition to make good on. It tried to lift itself, only to collapse, unable to get its remaining limbs under its center of mass to stand up. I suspect that you're not referring to your injuries. The lycanthrope convulsed clumsily about, its tumult ending with a regurgitation of a gout of vile scented blood. It was small by the scale of the creature, but still large enough to stain Tap's boots. It drew in and heaved out a series of labored breaths. This creature was clearly not long for the bridge, but it knew too much to die, or so it claimed. Talk. I have no intention of taking what I've learned with me to my death. You want the lycanthropes exterminated, don't you? Its remaining eye, as well as the crater of gore on the other side of the creature's face, fixated at Tap, as if not to stare not at him, but through him. But you wanted so much more than the others. There's something about you. It wretched around in what must have been agonizing spasms, though it made sure to refresh the bloody coat staining Tap's boots. I really think you have what it takes. Voidwalker. Tap. Get on with it, he prompted. The creature resumed a more casual rate of breath. If you want to wipe out an entire race, especially a race like the lycanthropes, you have to know how they work. The beast paused to draw in a deep breath as Tap gave it a quizzical glare. I know that you hunt in packs. I know that your kind consumes flesh without remorse. I know that your numbers are beyond counting. I even know that your nerve clusters are so densely packed that even a strike to the cerebrum is only enough to limit fine motor functions, which your kind have a little use for. Tap boasted. What more is there to know of your kind? Guess you're not as smart as you think you are. How many lycanthropes have you had meaningful conversations with? Tap had to admit that, until this very utterance, he had paid the creature's henceforth inexplicable vocal aptitude little attention, simply attributing it to a random fluke of lycanthrope genetics. Yeah, didn't think so, smart guy. It responded, as if to his very innermost thoughts. What does this have to do with your species? Everything, it answered. Only a fool would waste their time and effort on making a non-existent dent in the lycanthrope population. No matter how many of them you kill, there's always more, and those others keep killing your kind. And now, you're talking to one. Put it together. I thought you Mun were supposed to be clever. Tap grimaced at the beast's implications. The simple words struck him deeply, far more than they had any right to. You were transmogrified. By some means, they convert their victims into more lycanthropes. You're suggesting that, were I to eliminate their means of procreation, I would eliminate them. Suddenly, every lycanthrope death would impact their population in the same way every Zongrit death impact. Speaking of impacts, the impact of iron on steel rang through the cargo bay, turning Tap's attention in the other direction from the lycanthrope. The source of the clattering noise came from the girl's sword, which had been dropped. It still had enough momentum for a couple of low bounces before coming to a rest. The sword's wielder slapped back against a crate behind her and slid down to the floor, visibly despondent. Her speech only emanated as indecipherable mutterings while she curled up on the cargo bay floor, leaned back against the crate, rested her face against her knees, and ran her hands through her hair. I wonder who she lost. The lycanthrope pondered aloud, briefly leaving Tap's attention astray from far more pertinent matters. Focus. How do I reverse the lycanthrope transmogrifications? Well, the lycanthrope paused. Well, that's the tricky part. I've seen the hordes up close and personal, and I've seen enough to make some educated guesses. But they're just that, guesses. I have no idea what might happen if you were to actually kill one of them. Kill what? Tap pressed urgently. What single creature's death would cause a meaningful negative impact to the hordes? Some manner of living arcane linchpin of sorts? We can only hope. The creature paused for breaths, but it didn't remain silent for long. I've been using my condition to whatever advantage I can, looking to see if I could find any possible way to break this damnable curse. I've seen things no Mun has likely ever seen before. And you saw? Again, it paused, but not due to any physical pain. Enormous creatures. So much more powerful than any single individual in the brood. that only the stupidest among them dared attack it. To most of the horde, these single monsters held sway. They were like the images of dark, foul gods, like ancient Sarayan itself incarnate. Tap permitted the creature its superstition, but it would make sure to steer in wise directions, just in case its constitution were to fail drastically. By your description of a lycanthrope god, I wager what you saw was some form of... Tap struggled to find an adequate term to encapsulate the description for the beast that the fallen lycanthrope testified of. Lycanthrope progenitor, for want of a better word. The lycanthrope pondered, sounding at first like a grunt of discomfort. Progenitors. I suppose that's as good a term as any, or at least it would be if I was sure. There's no chance you would ever witnessed anything like this being. Truthfully, I believe I have. Impossible! How could you still be alive after seeing one? The creature bellowed in an audible disbelief that Tap couldn't blame it for having. Tap had awaited the day when what he had seen during that fateful battle could be corroborated. He surmised that the encounter was so rare as to be somehow significant, yet until this very moment, he could not fathom how. I was once brought to the Great Aegis on a communal commission, supposedly instigated by the Zongrit themselves. Mercenaries gathered from any realm that heard the call. For their part, a legion of precisely 100 Zongrit, not one fewer, had banded together. Before that day, those who knew the Zongrit wondered if that many actually still existed. The Zongrit oracles and scouts spoke of a coming invasion beyond any that the Zongrit could halt alone. It would be the greatest attempt to breach the Great Aegis since its inception. They were correct. I think I may want to call it there.
Very nice.
I'm getting a bit of a Western vibe to this. Kind of a space Western almost.
I've never really written it for the
with
purpose of being a space Western, but I guess I can kind of see that.
Firefly with werewolves. Also,
I like the werewolf.
I have seen things you can't imagine. Sea beams glittering off Tannhauser Gate. Fleets dancing off the shoulders of Orion. All those
That's a common stock phrase, to be fair.
like tears in the rain. Yeah.
I like the werewolf chap.
Yeah, he doesn't have his name yet. He's named at the end of the chapters. He's later called Corias.
Corias.
Arias.
You recognize him if you were around during when Dunn first did a reading of Nightingale, which is actually centered around him, though far later in the timeline. He'd undergone much growth between now and then.
What? This is a chap in a Commander Dunn novel?
No, I read it for him.
Oh, read it. I think.
Yeah, it was called Nightingale. You can actually go look these things up on DeviantArt if your Google Foo is any good. And you can see that I have assloads written, and I'm proud of maybe 5% of it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Valerian.
I'm actually not quite ready, so you might want to go now.
Mine's fairly long, but let me find it. So I've been thinking about kind of like reading one of my magic duels from Tempest of Shadow, which is one of my published novels. Let me share the screen so you guys can see it. So this is just the book that I'm going to be reading from. Kind of just reading from the original manuscript. For context, the girl Rayla has kind of touched something that she shouldn't really be touching at this point in time, in terms of her magic, and she went wild, and had her sense of reality warped by the this cosmic eldritch deity that kind of is out there to just make her life miserable, because he has a personal vendetta against the person that she was previous to before she was reincarnated. And he's sent he's put one of his exalted as kind of like a minder for her. I'll read the I'm actually thinking, what could shall I read the first thing, or shall I read the second thing, where it's kind of an actual duel as opposed to like somebody going wild? So kind of
whichever is earlier in the chronology. I'm reading this right now, and I don't want to spoil myself.
Yeah, do the earlier one.
Oh, you're reading Tempest of Shadow right now? Nice.
Yep.
What are your thoughts so far? Like, how far in are you?
Admittedly, not very. I've basically gotten as far as like parts that you've read on stream.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. Already, I'll read it early in the chronology. Okay. So this is chapter 15. So for context, Rayla and her friend Mal are performing on the docks, and Rayla set up a little like shield of magic to keep the stink of fish away from them, so that the audience can actually can actually like engage with what she's talking about. So, and unbeknownst to them, a man by the name of Gedwin has been hunting after them because Rayla cut off his ability to use the source, and now he's called Cyrus, and he's coming after them with the intent to trying to find Rayla with the intent to kill her. Okay. Bracing himself, Gedwin strode down the gangplank down to the Illicarn docks. The city proper was a beautiful sight with its rivers and intricate source-wrought buildings, but their docks were made out of brown, rubbery wood. And the smell, it was disgusting. Somehow they contained the stench of fish to this particular section of the city, likely through use of the source. Grimacing, Gedwin adjusted his sword so it was highly visible, then moved his purse to inside his jacket where it couldn't be stolen. As he pushed his purse and placed the purse inside of his jacket, his fingers brushed against the medallion the Master Kint had given him. It had actually stopped someone from touching him with the source. Shrugging, Gedwin started looking around for a bridge to get him to the city proper where he could buy a horse. Failing that, he could steal one and make a run for it. Hopefully the price wouldn't be too crippling. He'd have to cross several hundred miles of distance from here to Ja'ana's territory somehow. Or he could arrange to be part of a merchant's train as a guard. That might solve his problem. A female storyteller was reciting some story about a muscular man being manipulated by his wife, a large crowd already forming around her. Interested in what could be so good as to make people forget the reek about the docks. Nose still reeling from the stench, Gedwin took a couple quick steps to the crowd, then stopped dead. The smell of fish had suddenly vanished, replaced by clean air. Blinking, Gedwin backed up, then blanched as his nose was hit with the smell of fish. He took 2 steps forward, then frowned as the smell vanished. Someone was using the source to allow the storyteller to corner the market on a rather lucrative spot. Gedwin had to admire the ingenuity of whoever thought of that idea. It was quite brilliant. Abruptly, he realized something. Maybe the source user could send him home, or at least close to the border. He could show his pins and get transportation to the capital. Jana might even be able to heal him for his loyalty and his information about the woman using Cyrus as well as Ixissa. Perhaps supposedly the Exalt had bestowed such gifts on those who had proven their loyalty, or if they were severed during their service. Eagerly, Gedwin pushed his way through the crowd. Some of them muttered coarsely at him, but he didn't care. He had a chance to get the source back, the life and power that had been stolen from him. Finally, Gedwin made his way to the platform, then met with his second shock. The tall, brown-haired woman who had stolen the source from him was sitting on a pile of boxes, playing a harp next to the female storyteller he'd been hearing. For a moment, he stared at the person who had ruined his life, unable to believe that Iran had put such a gift in his path. Then her eyes drifted upward. They widened as she saw him, so she did remember him. Good. Gedwin drew his sword and leaped at his mortal enemy. As soon as Gedwin leaped at her sword bared, Maria grasped the source away from Rayla and hurled a blast of lightning at the Sorov. Instead of frying him, the construct unraveled around him, leaving only motes of light in the air. "Oh, Baga!" Maria shrieked in her mind. "Draw the damned rapier!" Not wanting to die, Rayla grabbed the sword from her pack and swung wildly at her attacker. Contemptuously, Gedwin slapped the sword blade aside and stabbed at her chest. Rayla barely had time to yell before Mal's glaive struck Edwin's sword aside. Faced and motionless, she swung right at his neck. As if he had predicted her movements, Gedwin moved backward ever so slightly and swung his sword in a deflection move. Rayla stayed behind her friend, not wanting to be caught up by a stray swing from her friend's glaive. Yet the crowd was rapidly moving away, some of them downright wanting to find some authority figure before someone got killed, which was looking more and more likely. Despite the advantage of the glaive's reach, blood flowed from a set of shallow cuts on Al's forearm and bicep. It was clear that Edwin was only intending to get around Mal and attack Rayla. His eyes seemed to burn as they glared at Rayla, completely focused on her. However, his skill was undiminished by his anger. Rayla had never seen anybody wield any weapon like this man use his sword. Mal might be good with her glaive, but it was still just a weapon in her hand. The sword was a part of the man and moved exactly as he directed it. After their short exchange, Mal received 5 cuts on her arms and 1 deep cut on her leg, while Gedwin was completely untouched. Clearly in pain, Mal backed away from her opponent, motioning Rayla to run. "Get out of here! I'll handle this bastard!" Waiting for Rayla to run, Mal charged. She swung her glaive in a wide arc, attempting to force him to back away. Instead of backing away, Gedwin calmly stepped forward, switching his sword from his right hand to his left, and allowed her to strike him in the side with the shaft of her glaive. Grunting in pain, and from the force of the impact, Gedwin slammed the crossguard of his sword into Mal's head once, twice. Crumpling, Mal fell to the ground, blood trickling from the shallow cuts in her arms and from the split in her head. "I didn't want to hurt her." Gedwin raised his sword to point it at Rayla. "I just wanted to kill you." Grimacing, Rayla raised her hand and drew on the green sword Cyrus, melding with Ixissa. Desperately, she and hurling a series of deadly constructs at Gedwin. Lines of fire evaporated a foot away from him, and pillars of fire didn't even touch him. Grimacing, she hurled the meat grinder construct at him, only to have it evaporate like the other attacks. "He's immune!" Maria shrieked. "Use the third source. It might be able to kill him." No, Rayla thought. Even if the ones I'm using aren't evil, that certainly is. "Fine, then let me take control of our body and fight him myself," Maria said quickly. "I know how to use a rapier, and it's looking like it's the only way to fight this man." "How good are you?" Rayla asked, holding up the sword and backing away. "I was a fencing champion back when I was alive," Maria declared. "Not a gold rank, but Silver was quite respectable back in my time. Okay, Rayla relented, allowing Maria to take full control of her body. Blood and fire, Maria remarked in surprise. You're a lot taller and less coordinated than I used to be. Beggars can't be choosers. Rayla grunted as she released the source. It would be a distraction. Sniffing distastefully, Maria moved her Rayla's sword hand up while sliding her left foot backward. Suddenly, Edwin attacked, moving like a striking leopard. Maria's fencing experience took over, but Rayla hadn't used a sword in her life. Maria's memories were of a woman who had spent decades practicing in her spare time and constantly developing her skills. Rayla's body wasn't used to the muscle movements that her other half had possessed. Her body moved instinctively, but it was slower than Maria remembered being. The voice cursed as sword met sword in a flash of blue and red sparks, the rapier's obsidian blade meeting gray steel with a loud clang. As soon as she exchanged a series of blows with her opponent, Rayla knew she was outmatched. Her enemy moved like a predatory animal, graceful and powerful, swift attacks causing her to back away. Face focused in a rictus of controlled rage. Gedwin came at her with a rapid series of blows. Maria only barely managing to deflect the attacks using Vela's very untrained body as if she was a marionette. Over the course of the fight, Gedwin began to look somewhat nonplussed by her method of fighting, but it didn't stop him from doing his best to kill her. Rayla had the slight advantage of having the longer, lighter weapon, but Gedwin was clearly an experienced killer, not just a duelist like Maria remembered being. He's very good, Maria thought, clearly frustrated at her inability to really fight the way she wanted to. He's using a very different sword technique than I'm accustomed to, so fighting him is a lot harder than usual. Well, at least, if we die, I'm just going to reincarnate in the back of someone's head. Ayla thought wryly. Please shush! Maria snapped, directing a powerful hack with a quick parry. They couldn't really engage Gedwin on a strength-to-strength level. Instead, they had to use deflection tactics, such as dodging and parrying. He's better than me, Maria gasped, seeming shocked. How did he get this skilled? Probably because he's an actual soldier and you are just a sportswoman? Rayla abruptly reasserted control, throwing herself into a roll on the dock as Gedwin nearly took her head off with a controlled one-arm slash. That is probably true, Maria agreed, sounding annoyed at any admission of something lacking in herself. I can't beat him. Even in my prime, I would lucky to hold on my own. We need to run. Where to? Rayla asked as the other one backed them away in a shuffling rush, moving away from Gedwin's blade more than running away than parrying now. Eris watched the fight under a veil of invisibility. With a wand, she could warp reality and become invisible as well as imperceptible to the sentence, not like simple begging light, ending of light possible with Isissa. The tall girl fought like a woman of her time before the collapse. Rapier fighting had been a favorite pastime of Eris's while she was a lawyer in the previous age, but in this time, finding someone skilled enough to engage her enough to give her a challenge was a chore. They all fought with broadswords with these new curved blades, hacking weapons, very inelegant. However, the one fighting the woman was very skilled. Maybe not the type of fighting she preferred, but Eris could recognize mastery in whatever form. Eris, the voice of Aron himself sounded in her ears. Do not allow her to die. I have many uses for her. My lord, Eris said quietly, somewhat surprised at receiving his attention. He is immune to the source. I saw the construct evaporate. All things have flaws, Eris, the Dark Lord said quietly. Throw a board at his head. Distract him enough for her to get away. Irritated at being commanded, but still intrigued by this sudden interference, Eris drew in a bit more of Isissa. Perhaps the girl was meant to be one of the exalted. She was strong, maybe even stronger than Eris. Calmly, she slid a tendril of Isissa to pick up a piece of rope. Eyes narrowed, she threw it at the swordsman's legs. Gilman was about to strike a blow at his opponent when being tangled around his and something tangled around his legs. Grunting, he fell over, swinging wildly in an effort to prevent himself from getting killed by the woman he was fighting. Snarling, he cut away at his bonds and pushed himself to his feet. Who had thrown that? He couldn't see anything, but nobody but him was on the docks. Abruptly, boards ripped themselves free from the docks. Oxen began flying at him. Gedwin instinctively sliced them out of the air, though a few slammed into the side that had been struck by the glaive shaft. Grunting in pain, Gedwin attacked more wildly, but something came up from behind him and shackled his legs. He fell again, this time a set of dock chains wrapped around his arms, pulling him backward away from his enemy. What the hell? He snarled, eyes darting around frantically. Still nothing. His enemy seemed just as stunned as him, her swords held in a slack grip. Gilman struggled against his bonds, but it was to no avail. So there were limits to his device. Why hadn't she killed him? She could have shot the sword at his chest and killed him. As if on cue, 5 spinning circular portals appeared in the air, discharging 6 white-clad sword users. Aesamon. And Gedwin grimaced. Great. Stop this now, a man with the golden insignia sewn onto his chest. Both of you stand down. He tried to kill me, the woman protested. Gedwin didn't protest. He was too dejected. The Aesamon source users would put them both in prison, and when his pins were discovered, they would execute him. Never mind he had been severed. They'd just kill him for being one of the Black Hand. He should have gotten rid of his pins, but he couldn't bring himself to part with that remnant of his former life. Sagging his bonds, Gedwin resigned himself to his fate. Stand down and accept a block, or we will use force, one of the women demanded. As soon as the Aesamon appeared on the dock, Eris prepared to leave. This might be a perfect opportunity to gain the girl's trust. Eris could represent her in her trial, ensure that she would go free through either argumentation or bribery, then slowly bring her into service beneath her. Make them look like the Black Hand, the Dark Lord suddenly commanded. I want her to fight them. My lord, what purpose does this serve? Eris asked. I have a base here, away from the Exalted. I sow my little seeds of disorder through my work here. I would prefer not to destroy this place or reveal myself. Keep the fight isolated to the docks, then. The Dark Lord sounded profoundly irritated. Just do it. Grimacing, Eris did as she was bid, though she created 2 layers of illusion. One clearly formed from Isissa, the other Iran. The girl would sense the former illusion, but the other would be invisible to her, as Eris had inverted and shifted the construct to be imperceptible to any except her. Something fluttered around the source users. A sheen of light formed from Isissa. There's an illusion around them, Maria remarked, sounding wary. It's quite good. I can't fully tell what exactly it is, but it's probably something we should wipe away. Okay. Rayla took hold of both orbs of light within her and slashed the illusion with both powers. She's holding Cyrus! One of the men yelled, sounding horrified. Block her now! The damage was done. The illusion around the white-clad source users fudged and vanished, then revealing that behind the veil they wore black coats and trousers. It was the Black Hand. They found me, Rayla thought, fear raging inside her as she glanced down at Mal. They didn't seem to be paying attention to her, but that was because she couldn't use the source. Abruptly, she saw several blocks with Cyrus and Isissa shoot toward her, but Rayla drew deeper and deeper on the music of the twin sources, causing the resonance to blare inside her. The sword drastically enhanced her abilities with Cyrus, allowing her to handle several cutting constructs to dispel all the blocking constructs. The blade glowed bright verdant green as she hurled the meat grinder at him. In unison, the women created a shield, halting her attack as the men launched a counterstrike. Fireballs flew toward her, coupled with bursts of ice and other crude death constructs. They seemed to be attempting to use their numbers to overwhelm her rather than combining into a ring. Contemptuously, Maria formed a barrier of Cyrus and Isis, blocking the attacks with a construct of ever-shifting fire and water to count the other attacks. Primitive, Maria remarked. Let me show them what we can do. The outline of an offensive construct looked into Ayla's mind. Immediately, Rayla raised her sword and hurled the power skyward. Clouds formed in the clear sky, lightning spiraling above the docks in a violent swirling haze. The enemy source users looked up, then leaped aside as bolts of lightning struck down from the sky, each blast specifically targeting one of the enemy source users. Shields formed around them, blocking her strikes, but one of them was too slow. The man fell to the ground, dead. Muscles clenching, Rayla raised her glowing green sword to point threateningly at her enemies. Leave me alone! Her voice boomed across the docks, enhanced by a quick burst of power. Finally, they formed a ring, one man and two women combining their powers in a single person, a woman with the usual skull and serpent pins on either side of her collar. Raising her hand, the woman attacked with a large block construct. The block slowly cut away at Rayla's connection, almost like a sluice gate closing on the Twin Rivers. Before she could attack, the remaining two source users struck with a series of fireballs. Rayla was hard-pressed to fend them off, but she still had the sword. Drawing on what felt like the maximum limit of the weapon, she attacked. Not the woman sending attacks at her, those she simply blocked. Instead, she targeted the strongest person in the ring by shattering the docks under them. Spikes of wood shot upward, impaling both of her targets with a loud crunch. Good work, Maria remarked as the remaining members of the ring gasped and clutched at their chests. Immediately, the ring dissolved just as another group of 10 more source users rushed out of a series of portals all along the remains of the docks. Those formed a ring of 6 as they saw her, while the remaining 4 joined in another 4 in attacking her. I can't handle 14 source users! Maria screamed inside Rayla's head. If they form a ring, they'll be able to shield us, even with our strange ability to draw on both sides of the source. There is a way of defeating them. The voice that echoed inside her head was not Maria's. It was terrible, dark, but melodious at the same time. Use my power, Rayla. It is your only option. Wait, Maria said, horror dawning as something seemed to dawn on her over her. That voice, I remember. Abruptly she hissed, Rayla, I might not believe in a creator, but I have seen this. Don't do this. Distracted by the voice in her head, Rayla had no time to react. The shield struck and cut her off from the source, at least the 2 halves she was holding. The dark red third source remained untouched. The green light in her obsidian sword went out. Good, one of the Black Hand members said in relief. Take her away, we'll deal with her. They'll turn you into one of them, the dark voice whispered. They'll make you serve the Exalted. You'll never be free. As it spoke, the red source grew larger and larger in her mind. Why was the block on the other orbs not even affecting this power? Rayla, please don't do this. Maria screamed. You can do this, the voice urged. I will aid you. Just embrace my power. With a scream, Rayla embraced the third source, power than either of the twin halves of the power, maybe even both of them combined, rushing in her, filling her with a combination of intense exhilaration and exquisite pain. Screaming, she lashed out with it. Black fire exploded in a wide wave, consuming the two of the source users in front of her. The dark flames left nothing behind, not even a trail of ash. For less than a second, they stared at her in horror. The great power, one of them whispered in horror. What? Some kind of redness skittering around the area. We must bring her to the Exalted. No. Rayla raised her sword, instinctively reaching through the sword to pull even more of the dark power. Immediately, the sword glowed bright red, even as the dark source raged into her through the sword. So much power that she could barely handle it. A sudden pain in her arm flared, but she ignored it. You will not touch me! Letting the power guide her more than she controlled it, Rayla pushed threads of air into her surroundings. Slowly she rose into the air, dark sword beginning to glow with a terrible red light. Pain flared inside her. She drew deeper and deeper in the dark source. Her divided skirts fluttered as the wind began swirling around her. The black hand attacked, no blocks this time, just offensive moves. Now she had an advantage with the dark power. Fine, let's end this. Eris watched in fascination as an aura of shadow flared around the woman, Rayla. That sword had to be an amplifier for the great power. How much was she able to channel so much of the Great Lord's might? But then again, before the weapon had gone red, Rayla had been drawing on a ridiculous amount of power. Drawing so much that simply by being there she affected the surroundings. The docks started cracking and crumbling, the fish rotting away to fetid scraps, ropes fraying and falling apart. Mouth watering, Eris gazed at the sword hungrily. Perhaps something would happen that would allow her to take that marvelous weapon. Abruptly, she noticed the bronze detector or bracelet on her wrist was glowing. Though it didn't mean anything other than the male half of the source was being used. Ignoring her device, Eris continued observing the battle. Knowing exactly what their enemy was now, the Asamon unleashed a barrage of attacks. As a result, Rayla created a shield of the great power. For a few seconds she was enveloped in fire, death constructs, and blasts of earth. However, there was something began changing about her shield. Bursts of black light shot from the construct, disintegrating each attack easily. Slowly the shield faded away, revealing the rapier-wielding woman at its center. Eyes completely black from her use of the great power, Rayla raised her free hand, then pointed at the Asamon. I will not be taken by you! The voice was terrible and magnificent, almost the voice of Iran himself. Abruptly, the woman that the swordsman had injured vanished, not through a portal. She just vanished. Probably to get her out of the way so that Rayla could unleash her full might. And unleash it she did. 4 death portals opened along the docks and shot toward the Asamon. Most of them managed to leap out of the way, but the attack was just a feint to throw them off balance. 3 black bursts of black fire shot from the tip of her sword, then split into a dozen smaller streams of flame, calmly increasing the strength of her inverted shield. Eris settled back on her seat and reinforced the dock she was sitting on. She would rather not fall into the river if Rayla destroyed more of the dock. The flames killed 2 of the Asamen, and a few of the others formed a ring to build their own shield, though they were limited by only having Cyrus and Isuzu on. Even though they were able to use both within the ring, it was limited to what one person could concentrate the magic towards forming the constructs. Some of the black fire struck the shield and bounced off, but after repeated strikes, a few holes began to appear in the construct. Deliberately, the Asamen attempted to forestall Rayla with bursts of ice in their own death portals, but she simply sliced them out of the air. Now that they weren't focusing on shielding her, the woman was free to use Isissa, but for some reasons a few of the constructs she was using had invisible strains. She must be using Cyrus as well, Eris thought in amazement. How is this possible? Before she had time to answer, Rayla opened a large portal in front of her, this one a black void. All of her enemies' attacks flowed into the portal and vanished. Absently, Eris began taking notes. Aran must be helping the girl, giving her knowledge of how to use his power. The portal was something Eris hadn't seen before, but now that she'd seen it made, she was confident she could replicate it. Instead of dissipating, the portal spun 180 degrees. Then the attacks they just sent her way exploded back at them. Get reinforcement! One of the Asamon females yelled to one of her fellows. This has to be one of the Exalted! Abruptly, suddenly, Eris shifted what she said to Rayla's ears as, get reinforcements! The Exalted will want her! She was actually quite proud of her illusion. Instead of surrounding the individual people as she came out, which would have been a pain. She simply surrounded the area with an inverted illusion that would make any Asimon that stepped out of the dock look like a member of the Black Hand. As she watched the battle, Eris was somewhat annoyed that she didn't have any food to snack on. It would have disintegrated or rotted away, but she wished she could have had something to enhance the experience. Rayla drew on all three powers, each one mixing and conflicting with the other, but she pushed them all together as she attacked the Sorabs. Flows of water shot from the river below, raising up chunks of liquid and transmuting them into shards of glass. Rage boiling inside her, she hurled the shards at her enemy. They blocked the attack with only a little difficulty. Sensing a lull, a few of them attempted to leave via portal, but she slashed the constructs before they had time to open. With a curse, she sent flows of earth into the dock, destroying the wood under her enemy's feet. Some of the men raised platforms of rock from the ground beneath the dock, but some of them sank into the river. Grunting, Rayla sent threads of fire and earth deep in the river and the rock underneath it. The earth writhed and roiled just as spurts of magma burst from the ground below the river, steam beginning to cover the area that had been the docks. Not far from her, Rayla heard screaming from the ships, but she ignored it. She had to kill the Soras before they captured her. Sarna had only enough time to leap off her ship before the explosion of magma burst through the dock, nearly cutting her ship in half. Several of her own crew had abandoned ship, but not before the cannons and blasting powder stores below docks exploded. Wooden shrapnel hit her back, but the water was just as hot. Her skin started to burn as she hit the water, causing her to gasp in pain. Multiple bursts of magma shot up from the river. Thankfully, no more came close to them, but the water itself was far harder than even the hot spring she swam in the caves near her home. Grunting in pain, Arna looked around, trying to get a bearing on the riverbank. Abruptly, she saw someone wrapped in ropes sliding below the waves. Gedwin. Forgetting about everything else, Sarna began swimming toward her trapped friend. He hadn't been struggling against the bonds, so he was likely unconscious. She tried to get to him before his hand slipped below the surface, but she wasn't even halfway before he disappeared beneath the water. Grunting in expectation of pain, Sarna dived down, skin stinging with pain as she went deeper and deeper into the river, ever toward the tied-up man. Eyes burning, she reached out and grabbed onto Gedwin's hand and started pulling him upward. Bubbles rose from his lips and hers as she pushed away toward the surface. He wasn't moving at all. Screaming internally with frustration, Sarna fought her way upward just as the water abruptly cooled. For a moment, Sarna was about to sigh in relief. Then the temperature began and rapidly dropping. They're freezing the river to keep the lava from destroying the ships. Bubbles rose from her mouth as she swam upward just as a sheen of ice began and spreading across the top of the water. Screaming, she pushed herself up out of the water and shoved Gedwin onto the bank of the river. Shivering and nursing her burns, Sarna began pumping his chest. After a few pumps, Gedwin started coughing as she rolled over and vomited half the river. "Oh, damn," Gedwin whispered. "What happened?" Sarnas pointed upward. Eyes blurry, Gedwin glanced upward. As soon as he saw the flying source user, his face twitched. "What the hell?" Swallowing, Sarna leapt back, not caring about the mud getting onto her pants. A miasma of darkness surrounded the flying source user, a glowing red sword in her hand. Her divided skirts roiled around her legs, deep black eyes gazing down at the Asimon. Blasts of fire appeared and were blasted out of the sky, portals into oblivion shooting from on both sides of the battle. Lightning swirled above them, bolts shooting down from the heavens to strike at the Asimon and the woman in the sky. However, each bolt of lightning that came at the flying woman was turned aside like it was nothing. Hers, on the other hand, struck with lethal force. Why is she attacking them? Gedwin wondered. They're supposed to be on her side. I guess not, Sarna muttered, glancing up at the destruction above and around them. The docks were completely destroyed. The wreckage of at least 5 ships lay smoldering in the bay. Even the river itself was significantly lower than it had been. The flying woman was clearly exceptionally powerful, based on the fact that she'd killed 3/4 of the Asimon. Gedwin actually looked terrified as he stared at the woman above the bay. This shouldn't be possible, Gedwin muttered. I've seen the Exalted demonstrate their powers. There was an aura of shadow and menace about them, but This, he shook his head, this is something else. Multiple blasts of fire shot toward Rayla, but each one she slapped out of the sky with the dark source. Well, not quite. Instead of a blade, the construct of a clawed hand was a... Instead of a blade, the construct was a clawed hand crushing whatever came within its grip. Kill them all, Rayla, the dark voice whispered in her mind. Show them that you will not bow. Rayla, please stop this. You can't do this. This isn't you. Breathing heavily, Rayla hurled a series of blocks formed from the great power at the enemy, cutting them away from the source. A couple of them she did it to indelicately, and she crushed their ability to use the source. Those she severed dropped to the ground, grasping their heads and screaming in pain. The black women stumbled back, clearly off balance. Rayla wrapped the dark source around herself, then warped away to where she'd sent Mal. As soon as the new source user vanished, Eris uncrossed her legs and stood up, calmly dusting off her skirts. The destruction around her was actually a thing of terrible beauty. Broken bodies were strewn all over the decks. A few of them had been torn apart, others had simply been destroyed body and soul by the great lord's infernal fire. A few had been frozen and shattered, and some had been consumed by the magma eruptions. Over the course of the fight, Eris had cataloged at least 10 new constructs that she can make with the great power. Oh, this is going to be a fun series of trials on insurance, she murmured. Abruptly, she realized what she was doing and grimaced. That fight had shaken her, much as she didn't want to admit it. The girl had so much raw, untamed power, and yet she'd crafted the construct with expert precision, handling 10 at once, where most amateurs could only handle 3 or 4. Such potential, such danger. I must find this girl and bring her into my service, she remarked, absently toying with the ring on her hand. Casually, she glanced at the trail of great power residue, then replicated the construct, with a few changes. The portal dropped her just outside a large forest. Smiling, Eris started walking toward the large amount of Aron that had been used to get there. Rayla collapsed on the ground in the middle of the large clearing at the center of the verdant forest. All 3 flowers fled away as she released them, leaving her with a terrible feeling of nausea and pain as the dark source went away. Moaning in agony, Rayla clutched her arms. Tears trickling down on her face, Rayla pushed herself up to her feet and started looking around for Mal. Blood trickling down her sleeve and scalp. Al lay on the ground, still clutching her Glaven hat. And that'll be at the end. That'll be the end. That was long, sorry.
Well, I hear you're up to 30 minutes now, so...
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
If this were a manga, you'd make a killing.
Okay, so let's see what I've got so far. I've got a power, a great power, one might even say a true power. These constructs, they sound very much like weaves. One embraces this power. At least one character has skirts divided for riding. How many other influences are we wearing on our sleeves here?
Quite a few, to be perfectly honest. Quite a few. Yeah. Yeah, this was very much kind of like me thinking about some of the things that I like and don't like about Wheel of Time and trying to do like my own thing with a lot of the concepts that I got or that I didn't feel like were like really explored, but I issue fan fiction because I don't get paid for it, so I tried to make it as different as I could.
Is the lady in the library area any relation?
Lady in the library, what do you mean?
She was like, her name was Aria or something, and she
Eris.
had like half of her.
Sorry. Eris,
No, a
sorry.
different lady. She had like half of her was paralyzed, and she went down into the library, and then she got these dark powers.
Different world entirely.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
No, you're fine. It's totally fine. I have like 6 or so books that I'm working on concurrently, each in the 2 in the same 2, I think 4 are in like their own respective series, and a few are like unique things.
Cool.
Yeah.
And did you say exalted? Like exalted?
Yeah, Exalted. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because there's also exalted in my story, but it's a completely different thing altogether.
Mm.
It's just a title in my story.
It is
It's a
kind
fairly common title. I've seen it all over the place.
Yeah, it's a yeah.
Yeah, but that was kind of like my magic duel. Like I tried to kind of make it as intense as I could,
Oh yeah.
but it's and kind of even though like somebody has like an immense amount of power, it's like it's not being used properly, or at least like it's used in a way that she probably wouldn't want it to be used.
Because it's being used by someone else, not by her. It's just not only by her, but by someone else, right?
Kind of, but also like these guys are technically the good guys that she's killing.
Now,
She's
so Gedwin is a good guy?
No, Gedwin is not a good guy, but the people on the docks that she's fighting against are good guys that got glamored essentially to look like the bad guys.
Oh, okay. So the power that's... Am I echoing?
Ever so slightly.
Oh. Let's see. How's that?
Yeah. It's fine. Oh, okay. Okay. Drake just sent me. So, apparently, so the link. Okay. Never mind.
It's a URL I kind of should have guessed.
Yeah.
It's very uninteresting.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. But yeah, that's kind of just like kind of a one on multiple magic duel with one person kind of going a little bit crazy and not being able to handle things. And now it's kind of she's going to have to eventually deal with that particular incident pretty far down the road, fairly soon down the road. It's not going to be pleasant for her.
And this is the lady with the rock concert too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Magic Rock concert.
Yes, I thought I remembered something like that.
Yeah.
Magic rocks. Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
I do like magic rocks.
Yeah, I just thought it would be kind of fun and interesting to basically have a Magic Rock concert in the middle of a storm, or at least like a storm that somebody creates and basically sings to the earth and makes using a guitar made of lightning and makes this entire desert area turn fertile. I just thought that would be a neat idea, and so I decided to put that in the second book.
Yes, pardon the spoiler.
Yeah, well, it's already been read. The spoiler's out. Yeah. Count Valerian, I believe it is your turn. Are you ready?
Yes. Can you hear me okay and no echoes or anything?
Yep. I hear you.
Yeah, let me mute my...
Okay. Upon entering the palace, the visitors were led up an actual stairway, something quite rare in Ichalamu and Peje, until they reached the third story, which was the highest point lowly subjects who weren't courtiers were usually allowed to reach, unless they had been, quote, invited, end quote, for less than decent purposes. It contained the audience hall for the more important nobles. To the left of the audience hall was the Turanian hall, with various chapels. There were no actual Turanians, of course, since they had all been banned from Equeque's exalted presence for refusing to prostrate themselves. Turanians never prostrated themselves before anyone, least of all some up-jumped semi-barbarian. And in any case, they found the decadent atmosphere of the court tasteless. Elsewhere on the third story was the chief banquet hall, and around it the halls of the chief noble families with the emblems of each family hanging over the entrance. Upon entering the audience hall, Margaret and Barama had a mixed impression of magnificence tempered, if that is the right word, with depravity. In terms of magnificence, neither of their castles had anything to pardon me a moment, compare it to this. Columns shaped like plants and animals they had, of course, but nowhere near so cunningly wrought, and not of rare alabaster, nor with giant flaming torches topped by stone flame holders. They gazed with astonishment at the marble floor whose tiles were inlaid with precious metals and stones, depicting a map of the world that had been repainted to place Sondaran in the center rather than Chugga. The hall had several levels, with the lowest for servants, the next for the lesser nobility, an intermediate level for the upper nobility, a higher level for the imperial family and clergy, and the highest of all for the emperor, whose throne was enclosed in a golden box encrusted with jewels. Therefore, the imperial government was often called Exalted Box, rather as one talks of the throne. The sacred relics of the holy Malala Amma were contained in a ruby and jade vessel atop the box, wherein the emperor was concealed. The box itself, needless to say, was very glorious, even if the noises that issued forth from it weren't. The holy Malala Amma would not have been amused. All the levels below that of the imperial family had their troughs of various precious materials, and the Sandaranians had added cushions to the troughs on the level for the upper nobility. The troughs had been placed there in Chuggan times, when courtiers had been expected to eat out of them. This practice had gone out of fashion after Sondaran had attained independence, but the troughs remained. The domed ceiling of the imperial audience hall was of gold, silver, and platinum, with some jewels, and depicted the Chuggan emperor, somewhat clumsily reinvented as Nyaja, being worshipped by vast multitudes. Around these multitudes of worshippers were painted the Turanian zodiac. From the ceiling there hung an enneagonal, that's Enneagonal, chandelier that partly covered up the Chuggan poison kanwari, which is a kind of bird. 3 courtiers to the right of the emperor's throne chanted, "The Emperor." 3 to the left chanted, "Is glorious," and 3 prostrated themselves, with their sarangis, needless to say, on the floor in front of the emperor, who used them as a footstool when he wasn't in the box. Behind the emperor was a mechanical singing bird who was supposedly, no distinct words could be made out, also praising Exalted. Prince Mpu'u and the imperial Yaji, their faces undecipherable, stood on the level immediately below the box wherein Exalted veiled his exaltedness and the reflected exaltedness of 1 or 2 sarangis. He was in a restrained mood. This all doubtless sounds very glorious. This all doubtless sounds very dignified. Unfortunately, some of the antics in which the emperor, and much of the nobility as well, was engaged were anything but. Those troughs of precious metals were filled with aristocrats frolicking with sarangis and assorted others. This is worse than my worst nightmares, thought Margaret, Ugh, thought Rama. We will draw a veil of decency over all that, however. It's not terribly interesting in any case. Fortunately, the emperor was concealed from the public gaze, but unfortunately, after hearing that Margaret and Barama had arrived, he emerged, looking distinctly unaugust. He was grotesquely fat, ugly, and not fully dressed, and the imperial haircut, which consisted of 3 horns dyed red, yellow, and blue, looked even more revolting than that sounds. Count Rama led Counts Pilamar and Garawada with their offspring to their designated troughs and blew a horn in token of their arrival. Tiyaku, who was seated with the imperial family in her capacity of Sarangi, but whom the emperor was not at the moment patronizing, introduced the newcomers, saying, "May Exalted graciously deign to welcome Great One Count Marojobo of Ikama, that is Pilamar of Ichalamu, with his fair daughter, my noble cousin the Lady Shirumbawaga, and my gracious father." "Bring them to our exalted throne now," he interrupted, "and take off their clothes." Oh, how did that go?" said Margaret. "That play about the cuckoo and the penguin. Exalted. It was the best she could come up with. How does one say no to Exalted?" As for Barama, he wasn't sure whether to commiserate with Margaret or to be relieved that Exalted hadn't noticed him yet. "Enchanting," said Ekwekwe. "Bring her here. Have her join our Sarangis now. Barama shall join us too. Let's all get together and—" Here he said something indecent that's best left out. Exalted pardoned this lowly servant. "She is too young," said Pilamar. "When they reach the age of majority, it may be a more fitting time for them to decide if they are worthy of this honor." "I, Exalted, have decided." Prince Mpu'u frowned, and the Imperial Yaji, Malalaama, looked grieved. Or bored? It was hard to tell. "Exalted, he speaks truly," said Malalaama. "His fair daughter is too young, and is not yet ready for the glories of Exalted's Merusa. Perhaps we ought to reform this custom." He said this not out of any real desire to alter the mores of the court, but as a concession to the feelings of these prudish outsiders. "At least for provincials," added Mpu'u. "They are not familiar with the ways of this court. They probably do not learn these things until at least the age of 18. Innocent people." This last sentence was spoken with what might have been a slight sneer, or not. "I dare to advise Exalted that we had perhaps best respect their bashfulness for now," said the Yaji. "Perhaps they can be persuaded to accede to Exalted will." "I, Exalted, shall wait 3 days," said Ekwekwe. "Do not test Exalted patience." And to punctuate that last point, he returned forthwith to his box and resumed there whatever he had been doing theretofore. The next day, Garawada and Pilamar received a request that they visit the Yaji in his apartments at the 7th hour of the afternoon, or around 10 minutes to 6 in our time. They reluctantly sent a message of acceptance, and at the appointed time entered the antechamber to the Yaji's apartments. This antechamber was a good deal chaster than its occupant, with bas-reliefs all depicting the sacred mysteries of the truth or events from the life of Karat. The inner sanctum of the apartments had a very different decor, but only Sarangis and the occasional other intimate were admitted there. "Suhru Nyaja Mishtaka Chanji," said the Yaji politely. Would great ones honor us by partaking in some rice cakes and uduru leaves soaked in beach wine? Anjamu Angara, replied Pilamar Angarawada. Blessed graces us abundantly. But we are unworthy, added Pilamar. Bless and pardon us. He did not know but that the refreshments might be poisoned. As it happened, they weren't, and murder wasn't the Yaji's style. But better besieged in a fortress than slain on the battlefield, as the saying goes. As great ones wish, said Malala Ama. It is a good vintage, though. Have great ones enjoyed this beautiful day with which Nyaja and Ishtaka have blessed us? We have, thank blessed, said Pilamar. May the light of heaven likewise shine upon blessed countenance. May we inquire why his blessed graced us with this invitation? Asked Garawada. I wish to give great ones wise counsel, for the benefit of souls probably, and bodies certainly, replied Malala Ama. We await Blessed's words. Garawada had the unpleasant feeling that the walls of the room were closing around him. It is never wise to resist exalted will. In the book of Runja, it is written, Agarantram lava pal numu jusatava, or in Sandaranian, the law makes the king and places you under him. That is true, said Pilamar, although the Holy Book also says, the king is under the law, or in the original, Agaran Nyaparai Hual. It further lays down, purity comes from the law, added Garawada. Ava Kijamma Pyaram. The Waramut is indeed mysterious in its utterances. Regardless, it were wise to accede to Exalted's wishes at least to the point of allowing Great One's fair daughter to join the Barusa. I have never quite understood how admitting children to the Barusa could be reconciled with the law, said Pilamar. Perhaps Blessed can enlighten us on this point. Does it not forbid making the young into concubines? The interpretation of the law is a complex science, subject to much debate even among the holy and the learned, said the Yaji. The Waramut also tells us that love is sacred, and we see this exemplified in the love of Saran for Avu. We even worship love in the form of Ru. It therefore seems that a small lapse in purity may be suffered for the sake of the greater virtue of love, or of loyalty to one's sovereign. Love, you call it? Said Garawada, beginning to lose patience. Sauron's uncle durst oppose Sauron, and we see what became of them, warned the Yaji gravely, fingering his sacred necklace. Sauron's uncles sinned not against him only, but against God, retorted Garawada. Wisdom is like a cloud that slowly fills with rain and at length causes it to fall from the sky, said Malala Ama. Consider well my words. We shall, said Pilamar. Blessed graces us abundantly with his words of wisdom. Speak to none of this. Pilamar and Garawada nodded, bowed. Very low, a corrupt Yaji is still a Yaji, in the Turanian fashion, and made their adieu. But they knew now, if they hadn't already, that they were walking a difficult path with a precipice on either side. And that is that.
Was that a made-up language in there, or is that based on something else?
That's a made-up language. Yes.
Still waiting on that Conlang stream, Lord Commander.
Oh,
Yeah, which of us didn't read something with some form of conlang in it today?
I didn't. I mean, I have a few Conlangs if I want to show them off, but there wasn't one in what I read today.
the Hedvari don't like the way that Aurora has only one word to mean for which purpose and from which cause, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. A lot of languages have different things for that. Actually, I got the idea from when I was learning Russian for my previous store, and there's two ways. Actually, there's three ways to say why. There's почему and зачем, and there's also отчего, but that one's much more formal. But почему is very much like why, as in like why is a thing the way that it is, as opposed to it's looking towards the past, versus зачем, which is very much forward looking, as in for what purpose. Or my girlfriend always translated as what for.
Yes, Turanian has the same distinction. Hawad is for which purpose, and him is from which cause.
Yeah.
They're different cases.
Exactly. Oh yeah, we got a lot to talk about on the Conlang show.
Yeah, hopefully we'll know about the Conlang thing in advance though, because if we only find out at the last minute, then I might end up missing it, and that would be very bad. I would be annoyed.
Yeah, I'm more self-taught at conlang, but I get out of it what I need and then get out.
Well, it depends on what you're using it for. You know, there's if you're just using it to create place names, or character names, or if you actually try to create sentences out of it. And then, of course, if you're trying to create sentences as in like verses in a holy text, or something that is not necessarily meant to be a conversation, as opposed to pragmatics.
Mostly just trying to find ways that dinosaurs would pronounce motherfucker, but
Yes. The age-old question.
Yeah, and that partly goes to which comes first, world building or storytelling, because in my case, world building comes first.
well, world building is kind of storytelling when you want to think about it. It's just a different kind of storytelling, or
Yes.
a different era of storytelling. It's like you're telling about something that happened way back when. It's like for science and sorcery, I have ass loads of world building, but like 1% of it is relevant at the start of the story. I hope that's enough to get by.
Yes.
Eventually, you do figure out the rest, but it's not important right now. Or at least that's what I hope.
Yes, and I'm still working on the history. It takes forever to do the history.
I will draft the schedule to kind of figure out. It'll probably be 2 weeks out, since this Friday, I know for sure that I'm having a stream with Leslie Sadai of Stuck in Arrakis. To the 7 people watching, please go watch her. Please go listen to her podcast. It is actually really, really good. I highly recommend Leslie's work. And she's going to be talking with me on stream on Friday about the Wheel of Time. It should be fun. And for next week, we're going to be doing School of Movies, talking about. We need to talk about fandom. And I was just like, oh, kill me.
Oh, goody.
Yeah.
Okay, that's some chap's YouTube channel, right?
No, it's a podcast series. It's 2 hours
Oh.
long.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like, it's going to be a long time. It's going to be a long one. They have a lot of dumb things to say. So maybe we'll be able to listen to shorter periods of it without pausing, but I don't hold out much hope. Yeah. At least, well, I kind of say at least they hate Game of Thrones, but they kind of hated Game of Thrones before it was cool to hate Game of Thrones, like when Game of Thrones was actually good. They hated it when it was like they hated it like they actually hated the Red Wedding. They were like, this is too much for us, and then they just like tapped out after the Red Viper died. And
They were wise then.
They kind of were, but like they kind of just say like it's toxic because they just say that Game of Thrones is toxic because it's like, and really there is kind of a little bit too much rape in the show, but they kind of just like we just don't want to watch this, and kind of just go with like it's really it's just weird reasoning for it, and they love Disney Star Wars for whatever reason. And I'm hoping to like before the before I read the Red Wedding chapter in the James Hibbert book, that we can watch some of the build up to it, so that kind of Neph and the others can kind of talk about it, since I'm interested to hear their thoughts on it.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, I think that's about it. I will put all of your stuff in the description below as soon as it comes up online. Thank you all for coming. Please, gentlemen, please, if you have anything to pimp, please pimp it.
All right. Well, I've still got my my novel, The Gates of Dawn, which you can pick up a copy of. And I also have a Patreon page, which has a link to my secret Discord server where you can watch me write in real time.
Fantastic.
I've got a SoundCloud where I've written or I've read out one of the sort of an audio drama that goes into a lot of the world building and history of my universe in Science and Sorcery.
Okay, well, the only thing I have online is a site that's been mirrored. It has a whole bunch of weird, mostly kind of related to Tolkien parodies. Most of them by me, but some by other people as well. It's at, well, I can give the Lord Commander chap the URL, info.hummelstein/teunc.org.
All right.
And that's got some stuff. I can give them the URL though.
Oh, there's some love. Well, it's just like Neph was really tired and wasn't able to come.
That was sad. Yes.
Yeah, and Wolf at the moment doesn't really have like a lot of stuff to give right now in terms of his writing, so he's just kind of sitting things out. But anyway, thank you all for coming. And we will see you later.
Have a riot.
Go! Holy shit. Okay, we're going. Go!
What happened? Does it go?